deliver. To a place created by Titans. Your kind have stood upon our shoulders since time immemorial. Chapter 2. Titans Rise and Fall.
Hello, welcome. Last time, we delved into Calandra's mysterious history, but we left one crucial figure out. The Titans. As we saw last time, the Trial Master had said,
"Oh, I'm only a couple of thousand years old. If you want to know more about the beginning of time, you'll have to ask the Titans. Well, Titan. Or that insufferably cryptic owl, if you don't mind paying such a horrible price."
But who, or what, are the Titans in Path of Exile? The Mythos of Gods and Titans. In mythology, gods are often tied to human belief. They are shaped by faith and gain power from order and structured worship. This is true both in Greek mythology and in the world of Path of Exile. The Olympian gods, for example, figures like Zeus, Apollo, and Athena are anthropomorphic. They intervene in human affairs, often driven by emotions like love, jealousy, and pride. Gods like Innocence and Kitava behave similarly, seeking power from the mortals who worship them. But the Titans are different. They represent something much older, something far more primal. In Greek mythology, the Titans were elemental forces, tied to the fabric of the universe. Cronus, associated with time, Okeanos, tied to the ocean. They were distant and indifferent to mortals. They ruled long before the Olympians, before the world became ordered and civilized. Similarly, the Titans in Path of Exile are not concerned with mortals. They existed since the beginning of time, long before the gods. But what happened to them? The Crucible League and the Revelation of the Titans. We learned more about the Titans during the Crucible League. The Crucible League introduced the idea that Titans once shaped the surface of Lightless, forming the land itself. They were the primordial architects of the world. But by the time of the game's events, only one Titan remains, the Molten One. This was stated in the launch page of the Crucible expansion. In Path of Exile, Crucible, you'll learn about the ancient Titans, who once shaped the primordial surface of Lightless. If you're powerful enough, you will learn the ability to forge their power onto your weapons. The Molten One is a figure worshipped by the Redblades, a warband of fierce warriors introduced in the Warband's expansion of 2015. Before the release of the Crucible League, the Molten One's true nature remains a mystery. Many assumed he was just another god, similar to the figures like the Cloven One or even Kitava. However, Crucible revealed that the Molten One is not a god, but the last surviving Titan. Interestingly, there is even a suggestion that Alhazmin, the Hunter, one of the conquerors of the Atlas, may have been a Redblade. In his voice lines he pleads,
"Molten One, save me from this unending nightmare!"
This could be a hint at Alhazmin's possible Redblade origins, adding some more layers to the story of their worship. For now, let's travel back to an ancient era, the time of the primeval civilization, also known as the Proto-vaal. So, here's a quick timeline recap. Kalandra and the Titans are among the only known entities present at the beginning of time. Kalandra, as the story goes, becomes trapped in the lake, and please check out my previous video for more information about this. The Molten One began to be worshipped by the precursors of the Redblades, and we will explore this in a moment. The Titans vanished from the surface of the world, and I emphasize the word surface. In the present, the Redblades still revere the Molten One.
Afraid of the dark, Exile? You should be. The darkness in this mine is alive. It's hateful. It's hungry.
The Redblades and the Proto-vaal. Now here's where things get interesting. I believe the disappearance of the Titans and the event known as the Winter of the World are connected, and I also believe the Redblades are at least partially responsible. So let me explain. The Winter of the World refers to a period where the sky was covered in ash and the sun was blocked. It's a time of darkness and despair that led to the downfall of the Proto-vaal civilization. But who caused the Winter of the World? I theorize that the Redblades, specifically their ancestors, played a part in unleashing, even accidentally, a great evil onto the world. They weren't just warriors, they were worshippers of the Molten One. They believed that by making sacrifices to him, they would at least please him. But they were wrong. The Proto-vaal civilization, often referred to as the primeval civilization, is a lost society that predates even the Vaal Empire that we know today. While the name Proto-vaal is never used in-game, it appears in various game files linked to enemies, bosses, and skills. The most significant references to the Proto-vaal are found deep within the Primeval Ruins biome in Delve, where remnants of their culture still linger. As we delve deeper into the Primeval Ruins, we encounter bosses like All, the Crystal King, and sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, one of the last figures from this fallen civilization. All's story is one of leadership, struggle, and ultimately tragedy. His presence in the deepest parts of Delve tells us that the Proto-vaal faced cataclysmic events likely tied to the fall of the Titans and the rise of the Lightless. The Proto-vaal's history, as revealed through the Delve unique rings dropped by All and other primeval bosses, can be divided into three distinct periods, each represented by a figure central to their history. Yuzaza, Piltembo, and Akali and their respective rings provide a glimpse into the Proto-vaal's rise, peak, and eventual downfall. Each of these rings follows a specific narrative structure, which I believe goes like this. Middle, it's the start of the journey, a place of origin, growth, and potential. Mountain serves as the peak, the obstacle, or a climax of the story. Valley, it's the decline, the conclusion, the aftermath, symbolizing death, resolution, or hidden renewal. Now, let's explore each set of rings in more detail. Yuzaza's rings. The story begins with Yuzaza, which I believe was the first king of the Proto-vaal. Yuzaza led his people as they sought to establish a home in a cold, harsh world. This tale is one of perseverance, as he guided his people to a place where they could survive and grow. Through the three Yuzaza's rings, we learn about the challenges he and his people faced. Yuzaza's middle. Cold winds blasted what little grew on the icy surface. The gifts of the land lay hidden deeper, and only patience and persistence would free them. This line speaks to the hardships Yuzaza's people endured. The surface was barren, but Yuzaza knew that the land held hidden riches below, waiting to be claimed by those with patience and will to dig deeper. Yuzaza's mountain. The narrow path turned to rough rocks that led towards the sky. One last obstacle in a lifelong journey to find a land they could call home. Here, he and his people faced their final challenge, a climb up a rugged mountain, symbolizing the culmination of their long journey to find a safe, habitable place to settle. Yuzaza's Valley. Sheltered beneath thick ice, the river ferried fat fish towards the sea, but the first king knew the river's secret, and the fish were not the only ones who grew fat. In this passage, we see Uzasa's wisdom. He understood that the river held more than just fish. There were deeper secrets, resources hidden beneath the ice, which would sustain his people and allow them to prosper. Some speculate that An, a mysterious figure depicted in the items, An's contempt, An's might, and An's heritage. Due to these equipment's appearance in one of the murals found in the primeval ruins, which you can see that there are people bowing and cheering for this figure. However, I don't think that's the case. You see, all rings seem to have a protagonist, a focal point. In Uzasa's story, we focus on the first king. In Akeli's story, she is the only character really being portrayed there. In Putambal's ring, some might argue that the focus is on the last king, but no. All just happens to be a part of the story. But the protagonist, the main character of the Putambal's ring's narrative, is Putambal himself. Of course, in the figure of the passing king, as we will see next. We turn to the rings of Putambal, which tell the passing king's story. The rings describe how all rised from humble beginnings as a slave to becoming the leader of his people. However, his rule coincides with the beginning of a series of catastrophic events that would lead to the collapse of the Proto-vaal, Putambal's meadow. The fields were silent, but for the plucking of fruits, the hustling of leaves, and the breaking of stone. No slave dared to speak or look the passing king in the eye. No one, except All. This passage shows All's defiance, even as a slave. Unlike the others, he was not afraid to meet the gaze of the ruling king, foreshadowing his eventual rise to power. Putambal's mountain, he surveyed his lands, green and vital, watched with pride as his slaves quarried fine stone for his fortress, and thanked the heavens for his many blessings. But this pilgrimage to the peak was to be his last. This describes the king at the height of his power, surrounded by prosperity. However, his journey to the mountain marks the beginning of the end. It's his final pilgrimage, Putambal's Valley. With no stone for rebuilding, each storm took its toll on the village. Huts eventually collapsed, their occupants injured or dead. Bodies were left by the river to appease the gods, but the dead would not remain there. As the storms ravaged the land, the village fell into ruin. With no stone to rebuild, the people's only recourse was to leave their dead by the river, as an offering to the gods. But the dead did not stay at rest, hinting at the growing presence of dark forces. Something was using the corpses left by the river. There is also a piece of this story in the Crown of the Tyrant's text. You will know if your subjects follow you from fear or respect when you have your own moment of weakness. If it's the former, they will tear you into pieces like rabid dogs. The story of these rings reflects the passing of an era, with all rising to power after Putambal as the last king. The rings highlight the transition of leadership and the growing instability caused by the passing king's inability to attend to his subjects' needs, asserting his rule based on fear rather than respect. Finally, we come to the story of Akeli, the clay shaper. Akeli's rings detail the events that unfolded as her village was destroyed by an unnamed disaster. As the destruction spread, Akeli sought refuge in the mountains, seeking to escape the devastation. Akeli's meadow, where once had stood a village, lay naught but splinters. Some had once been her home, some had once been her creations, some had once been her family. This passage paints a vivid picture of the destruction that swept through Akeli's village, reducing everything she loved, her home, her creations, her family, to nothing but splinters. Akeli's mountain. Fleeing the destruction set upon her home, the clay shaper sought safety in the clouds of ash above. Here we see Akeli's flight to the mountains, as she tries to escape the devastation. The clouds of ash likely referred to volcanic eruptions, further reinforcing the sense of the cataclysm happening at the time. Akeli's Valley. The river, once fertile and fresh and flowing briskly to the sea, now stood stained at a standstill, dammed by the coagulating dead. This grim description reflects the final collapse of her village and therefore of the Proto-vaal civilization. The once lively river is now choked with the dead. Interestingly, Putembol's Valley and Akali's Valley overlap in their stories, both telling of the escalating destruction that plagued the Proto-vaal. This alignment suggests that the downfall of the civilization was not the result of a single event, but a series of disasters that struck simultaneously, weakening its society as a whole. These tragic stories are reinforced by the murals found deep in the primeval ruins, which depict scenes from the lives of these ancient figures. In one mural, we see slaves carrying stones under the blazing sun, a scene reminiscent of the Putembol's mountain story. In this one, we see a description that fits Akali, with the clay shaper weapon and a golem. These murals, like the rings, offer glimpses into the history of the Proto-vaal. The rings of Uzaza, Putembol, and Akali are all different parts of the same story. Uzaza, the first king, led his people to a new home. Putembol, the passing king, saw his land prosper before disaster struck, and Akali, the clay shaper, witnessed the final days of her village before fleeing. The winter of the world and the rise of the Lightless. These events led to what became known as the Winter of the World. The Winter of the World represents a period when the sky was covered by ash, plunging the land into an endless winter. But it wasn't just the cold and darkness that threatened the land. Beneath the earth, the Lightless emerged, clawing the way to the surface. For humanity, it was a war for survival. As the Abyss launch page says, before Solaris graced Rayclast, a race of repulsive beings, fearful of light, populated the gloomy wastes. They were thought to be long dead, with few traces and no mentions in historical accounts. That is, until the earth itself was torn asunder. The Lightless were creatures that thrived in the absence of light, beings from a time before the sun god Solaris had touched the land. Since we know the sun already existed in the Proto-vaal era, as we have seen in the murals before, it is safe to assume that the Lightless are from an ancient time before the sun existed. When this happened, they fled to the abyss depths, waiting for an opportunity. The Winter of the World, by the way, isn't only known in Proto-vaal history, it is also a pivotal moment in the record history of the Marikath. This event was the first ever documented by them, spanning the period between the rise of the Lightless and their eventual defeat. After the initial attack, the survivors, including Akali, the clay shaper, which was a Proto-vaal, we saw her story in the rings before, remember? Formed an alliance to resist the invasion. From this alliance, we have the foundation of the Order of the Jinn, with the clay shaper becoming known as its honored founder. Akali's golems and relics of power played a crucial role in the defense of the Vastiri Plains, helping the Marikath and their allies push back the tide of darkness. It's important to note that while Akali played a crucial role as one of the founders of the Order of the Jinn and was instrumental in the war against the Lightless, she did not live to see the end of the conflict. This is revealed in the Gilded Abyss Scarab, which states, "The winter of the world has ended at the hands of the three sisters. We lay this scarab upon your ancient grave in thanks for your efforts, honored founder. The fate of your people will never befall another." During this desperate struggle, the twin sisters Solarai, I'm not really sure, and Landara arose as powerful leaders. Solarai wielded a spear imbued with the essence of gold, while Landara fought with a weapon holding the essence of silver. Together, they led the fight against the Lightless, and then the Winter of the World came to an end. The Lightless were driven back underground, securing the survival of the surface dwellers. But how do the Redblades and the Titans fit into this ancient struggle? How were they connected to the Winter of the World and the rise of the Lightless? Here's where we begin to see the larger picture. My theory suggests that the Redblades' ancestors were directly involved in the events of this dark age. And the Titans, ancient beings who shaped the very foundation of the earth, played a critical role in the outcome of these events. Now let's dive into what I believe happened, where things got a little tricky, but I'll do my best to build a straight narrative of events. To simplify things, let's refer to the ancestors of the Redblades as the Prime Redblades. First, the Prime Redblades populated the territory. They had an outpost, as it is referenced by the Redblade Tramplers, that was destroyed and subsumed into the caldera by the power of Titans. This resonates with the item's description. It says, "Our home was swallowed beneath the great mountain for our complacency. Now we must prove our value to the Molten One by sating his hunger for life." The emergence of the mountain was a turning point. The Prime Redblades saw the power of the volcano, and in their awe and fear, they began to worship the Molten One, believing that sacrifices would appease this primordial force. This belief, however, was misguided. The Titans, including the Molten One, were indifferent to the lives and offerings of mortals. This indifference is clearly echoed in the Elabin's visage. As the fire remnants of our outpost were subsumed into the caldera, a thunderous voice echoed across the barren landscape.
Your fragility is your folly. May others rise where you have fallen.
This message highlights the futility of their sacrifices. The Redblades believed they could earn favor with the Molten One, but in reality, their fragility, their human weakness, was their downfall, not the lack of sacrifices. Katarina reinforces this harsh truth when she confronts Corel Goya, a modern-day Redblade, about the uselessness of their rituals.
How many did you fruitlessly feed to your molten god, Redblade?
Prime Redblades thought their offerings had meaning, but the Titans never cared for human life. The Redblade Caldera expands on this, showing how these tribes were largely irrelevant to the Titans. As time passed, the Proto-vaal eventually settled in the same region. The Prime Redblades coexisted with them, but there was tension as both cultures vied for dominance in the region. This conflict would explain the description in All's uprising text. It was not his fearlessness or ferocity, nor his tactical genius. It was his leadership that earned All, the last king, his crown. All earned his reputation for tactical genius. If so, battles should be happening at that time. My guess is those battles were fought between these two groups, Prime Redblades and Proto-vaal. I believe the volcano the Prime Redblades lived is in the very same mountain where the Proto-vaals established themselves, as depicted by this mural. Then, lots of people were killed in this territory dispute, added by the casualties of the storms that were caused by the passing king's obsession with his own fortress, leaving citizens unprotected from the forces of nature, and the sacrifices of the Redblades. The high death toll of these conflicts and sacrifices were exactly what the Lightless needed to rise in power. Remember, there is nothing, flesh, spirit, or stone, free from our hunger for dominion. The Lightless hunger extended over all things: flesh for mortals, spirits for the dead that would serve them, and stone referred to their control over the Titan themselves maybe. Their relentless conquest is further confirmed by the bubonic trail. Even the dead serve the Lightless. With these enslaved spirits and corpses, the Lightless began their siege inside the volcano that gave rise to their legendary weapon and warband. Despite the forge of the Redblade and their attempts to fight back, the Prime Redblades failed to achieve victory. Its forging marked the melding of man and Titan against the rising darkness. But the Lightless proved too strong. As they conquered the volcano, they poisoned the land, turning its peak into a source of ash, creating clouds that blocked the sun's light. This was all they needed to secure their dominance, as seen in Darkness Enthroned. Hold in your hand the darkness, and never will light blind you. Their very nature defines them. They are creatures of the depths, inherently hostile to the light. This sentiment is echoed in Amamamu's gaze. The Liege of the Lightless seeks dominion over the surface dwellers. I believe this is what the final panel depicts when the Lightless claimed the volcano, unleashing the ash and darkness that allowed them to achieve victory over the surface dwellers. It was at this critical juncture that some of the Redblades managed to flee, alongside maybe Exile the Clay Shaper, and the few remaining survivors of the primeval civilization. The damage, however, was already done. The Lightless had overrun the volcano. All the last king became trapped in his citadel, now deeply buried beneath the earth. This marked not just the destruction of the primeval civilization, but also the fall of the Titans. The primordial remnant captures this tragic fate. Calandra watched as the almighty Titans fell, relegated to the innermost depths of the world, where horrific abominations awaited them. This event signaled the rise of the Lightless, and marked the beginning of the winter of the world, a period defined by the irresponsibility of humanity. Needless blood was spilled over territory disputes, unthinkable sacrifices made in fear of the unknown despite the Titans' indifference, a king's ignorance as he used all his resources to build a fortress for himself, leaving his people defenseless against natural disasters. So many grave mistakes were made, leading to this apocalypse. However, before their fall, I believe the Titans left something behind to aid Exile in the war to come, the Geomantic Gyre. For their mortal allies, the last Titans forged a mighty staff, one that could safely hold the first unearthed virtual gem. This theory aligns with Exaile's identity as the Clay Shaper, a conjurer of golems. It would make perfect sense for the Titans to create a powerful artifact to amplify her geomantic abilities. The Abyss Scarabs, which have since been removed from the game, seem to pick up the story right where Exaile's rings left off. But this will be a topic for the next video. Now, let's take a look into what PoE 2 has to offer, and oh boy, I think it just makes these theories even stronger. Path of Exile 2 and the Titans. Wow, that was a lot of lore, right? I think we're only scratching the surface of what Grinding Gear Games is planning to reveal about the Titans, and I have a feeling we'll get even more in Path of Exile 2. It is already confirmed that the Titans are going to play a role in the upcoming story. One detail we haven't fully explored is the Titans' connection to virtual gems. It's been revealed that the Titans themselves gifted the first virtual gem to mortals. Something doesn't quite fit with the lore we know so far. Traditionally, virtual gems are tied to the beast, which should have been created much later, I think. So how does this make sense? Could there be another source of corruption that predates the beast? It has to be, otherwise this story wouldn't have made sense even geographically. Based on this map, I believe this all happened in this part of the Vastiri Plains. It would explain the lake beds northwest to Marraketh. This also fits all points of the Proto-vaal story. It has the rivers, it has the mountains depicted in the murals, it even is the place in the map where the Titan Valley is located. Being close to Marraketh makes even more sense, as the survivors of the Lightless invasion would be able to flee to Marraketh afterwards. We know that the beast is established in Mount Veruso, and there's no indication that these events could have happened there. This way, I truly believe that the essence of corruption and the power of virtual gems may not have the beast as the primal source. The power that we see from the beast may just be a consequence of something hidden even deeper. This idea becomes even more interesting when we consider recent gameplay footage from Path of Exile 2. The first trailer hints that even after Kitava's death, corruption still spreads throughout Redblades. We see underground areas that look suspiciously like the Abyss Depths, leading us to think there might be a deeper story here. Perhaps the corruption we've always associated with the beast isn't the only power at play here. The Colossus boss featured in Path of Exile 2 release trailer could even be a Titan corrupted by the Lightless. This boss is found in the Titan Grotto, which is located inside the Titan Valley. The flame ruby he drops, described as burning with the primordial heat of a long ago Redblades, also indicates this origin. Even his physical traits are compatible with what we would expect from a Titan, and his appearance shows visual elements from both the Titans and the Abyss. In essence, the fall of the Titans is deeply linked to the collapse of the Proto-vaal civilization, the rise of the Lightless, the Molten One, and the origins of corruption that may not be tied strictly to the beast, but rather to a deeper power lurking within the earth itself. Perhaps This is why so many characters in Path of Exile report hearing strange voices, most notably Nico, the Delve NPC. Nico begins hearing these eerie whispers as he digs deeper into the Azerite mine, and his descent into madness intensifies, especially after you defeat all the Last King in the primeval ruins. So here's my conclusion. The fall of the Titans is tied to the collapse of the Proto-vaal civilization. These events are deeply connected, shaping the ancient history of Lightless, the rise of the Lightless, the worship of the Molten One by the Redblades, and the origins of corruption seem to point to something much older than the beast. Perhaps a power that comes from the earth itself. Virtual gems, long thought to be tied solely to the beast, may have deeper roots connected to the Titans and the primordial forces that shaped the world. Of course, it's a mystery still unfolding, and as we continue to explore Lightless, the truth behind these ancient powers may finally come to light. In the next episode, we'll dive into the winter of the world and explore the aftermath of this long-fought war, uncovering the devastation left behind and the lasting impact on Lightless' future. Thanks for watching.